Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Committee of the Whole meeting on February 7th, 2022. Before we start, I will remind Council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed over YouTube. I will now do a roll call of Council for the benefit of the public watching this meeting. I, Councillor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Mayor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillor Merlihan.
I'm present.
And Councillor Redekop.
Present.
I have a resolution to reconvene an open session. Do I have a mover? Councillor Martin and a seconder. Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? And that is carried. I'd like to read our land acknowledgement. The land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the natural people, also called Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee people who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land inhabited together. Do any members of council have any declare of pecuniary interests? Seeing none, we have no items to come forward. So we'll start with our public meeting. The following portion of the meeting is for information only, and no decisions will be made tonight. Any questions can be directed to Development Services staff following the meeting. I declare the planning public meeting to be open. We have Manager of Planning Jeremy Vink with us this evening to provide council with an overview of the application. Mr. Vink, when you are ready, you may begin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. This is the zone change application 1/2022 for the property at 6515 line 86 for Robert and Lisa Shu. The applicant is proposing to amend their current site-specific agricultural zoning. What they're proposing to do is to remove the mobile home and to permit a bunkhouse. The bunkhouse would allow 3 separate pods together, would kind of as a unit, and within each of those pods they'd be having up to 9 people for a total of potentially 27 people. So what they're proposing is a bunkhouse under the agricultural and seasonal farm workers. This will be a temporary use at this time, which means up to 3 years, and which could be extended in the future if need be. At this point, staff would just note we are looking at amending our zoning bylaw once our new official plan is approved to allow bunkhouses of permanent use. However, we can't do that at this time, so it will be remaining as a temporary use at this point in time to allow the bunkhouse. If there's any questions, staff is willing to answer them.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Vink? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Not necessarily specifically, but is this something we have a lot of in our township?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor McMillan, no, it is not common to have extended seasonal farm help generally in our township. We are starting to see it a little more because of the intensive use of some of our farms with something like the orchard, in this case, on this parcel. I know Martins have had it in the past with their mobile homes, have used them for seasonal farm help. And we might start to see some additional farm help in some of the other operations as they can't find farm help locally. They'll go further afield, such as the sod farms. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Next, we will hear from the applicant, Mr. Robert Shu, who would like to speak to his application. Mr. Shu, you may turn your audio and video on and begin when you are ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Shantz.
Mayor, Sean's councillors, and Woolwich staff for this opportunity to address you here today. Jeremy, you did a great job of outlining what we want to do, and I just want to add a little more context for the why of what we hope to build. At the farm property under discussion today, we produce apples, a very labor-intensive commodity. Most of the labor is provided by workers who are here in Canada under the Seasonal Agriculture Worker Program known as SOP. One of the requirements of that program is that we supply them with accommodation. SOP is a federal program, and they empower the local health units across the country to oversee these accommodations. So in our case, it's Waterloo Public Health. The local health unit is the ultimate authority to which we submit on all matters related to this housing, and all other government agencies fall in line behind them. At 8 years of age, the orchard is now entering into peak production, and we require more workers for just the 6 or 7 weeks of harvest season, more workers than what the current mobile home can hold. So we're looking to build. This is a replacement for the mobile home, not in addition to it. If we had reached this point in maturity of the life of the orchard prior to COVID, we would not be having this meeting, as public health formerly permitted large groups of people to live congregately, sharing a large kitchen with multiple sub-kitchens in one room. All that, as I understand it, would have been permitted under the current Township Ag zoning regulations. Well, COVID has changed everything. Public health now wants to see people housed in smaller groups referred to as pods, so that a COVID outbreak does not necessarily affect everyone on the farm. Public health recommends these pods, which by township definitions is a multi-unit bunkhouse with separate and distinct entries, kitchens, and washrooms. And finally, depending on the plans of the next generation in our growing family, in the event that the decision is made to expand the orchard further, we now request permission at some point to add an additional pod to the complex at a future date without having to request another zone change. Thus, the reference to potentially holding 27 people in the future, but the current build would be just for 18 people. So that's my opening report, and I'm now happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Shu. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Shu? I'm seeing none. So thank you, Mr. Shu. You may turn off your video and mute yourself again. I will now ask the clerk if there are any unregistered speakers in the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no unregistered speakers at tonight's meeting.
Okay. There being no further speakers, I declare the planning public meeting to be closed. We have no presentations, no delegations, and no unfinished business. Consent items. Before we pass a motion approving and receiving the consent items as agenda as a whole, does anyone wish to remove any items for approval, pieces of correspondence, or items for information for further discussion? Not seeing any. Do I have a motion to accept the minute or the consent items? Councillor Redekop, Mayor Shantz, all those in favor? And that is carried. Staff reports and memos. First up this evening, we have Fire Chief Dennis Aldos to provide council with an overview of his memo. Dennis, you may speak when you are ready.
Thank you, Chairman Shantz. You all might remember back in the provincial governments when the Liberals were in power, they came out with mandatory certification for all fire departments and firefighters. Then when they didn't get reelected, our conservative government rescinded it. And on January the 28th, 2022, our provincial government has, through our Ontario Fire Marshal, has sent out communication regarding mandatory certification and it coming back. They have posted a document, consultation document, has been posted to the Ontario Regulatory Registry. And this posting is open for feedback until February the 28th. Fire staff has been working through with the OFAC to provide comment on behalf of all Ontario fire departments. If this goes through and becomes law, it'll come into effect on July the 1st, 2022. Part of the reason for bringing this forward is on a meeting I had on February the 1st, I found out that you will be made aware of it in AMO on February the 24th from the OFM. So I thought it was pertinent to let you know that we are working diligently to figure out what the impact is going to be on the fire service in Woolwich. And we will be bringing a report forward to council offering what the impacts are going to be and how we can best make this happen for us with a little impact as possible. Do you have any questions?
Council, do you have any questions for the chief? Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. Are you bringing back a report before the end of February then?
Through Chairman Shantz to Mayor Shantz. I'm not too sure on the impact if it's going to be before the end of the month or not. The entire report, we have a good idea what our impacts are going to be right now. We're consulting with our district chiefs and deputies on Wednesday evening. And then after that, we'll have a pretty good idea what their opinion is on what the impacts are going to be. And I'm hoping to have something back to you in some form before the end of the month, yes.
So the comments are correctly.
Sorry, Mayor Shantz,
Oh.
your speaker cut out on you. Try again.
Okay, I'll try again. The comments are due by February 28th. Is that correct?
For the fire department, it is due by February the 28th. I'm not sure what your deadline will be on the municipality side. So we're already putting our comments back through. We have a meeting on Thursday of this week with Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs. So we're going to offer some of our impacts at that time. So I'm hoping to have something back to you before the end of the month, at least giving you an outline of what our impacts will be.
Okay, so there's another consultation with municipalities. I think I missed something here.
Yes, you're going to get AMO and the municipalities are getting correspondence from the OFM on or around the 14th of February.
Okay, and our comments are due by the end of February?
That I don't know at this time. Our first meeting with the fire marshal's office is tomorrow morning, in which time I'll have a better idea what's happening, but.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing any. Thank you, Chief Aldos.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have a memo Old Order Mennonite Church taxation. We have Director of Development Services, Deanne Fries, with us this evening to provide council with an overview. Ms. Fries?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just providing council with an update. It was requested at the last meeting that staff provided an update on what's happening with the taxation of the Old Order Mennonite Church. So that's what this memo is providing. We have the policies that we put into our new official plan. That official plan is still needing to be approved by the region. So we are following up with that. The region will also have to have similar policies in their regional official plan to also allow the severances, but we are in discussions with the region in the meantime to see if approval of the severances could be granted under the new severance policies in our official plan and the existing policy framework in the regional official plan. So still in discussions, but working towards a conclusion.
Thank you. Any questions from council? I'm not seeing any. I just have one comment. This sounds very familiar. I think we've heard this before, and I thought the region was going to try and expedite this a little bit. It doesn't sound like they've put it on the top of their agenda. So are they going to look at it a little sooner than later, or we have to wait for the official plan?
We do have to wait for our official plan to get approval from the region, but I did follow up with them last week, and they did say that they were going to move it up on their priority list. It's the question about whether or not we need to wait for the regional official plan that we're still having additional conversations about.
Okay, thank you. Council, last chance. Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to Deanne, I'd just like to say thank you for bringing this back to us within a week. That's very refreshing.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Freeze. Breslau settlement and area. Oh, back. You're still on board. Next, we have Ms. Freeze again.
If I'm just able to share my screen quickly. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So as requested by council back in December of 2021, we provided a background report for the Breslau settlement area and the transportation and land use planning for that area. So I'm just doing this through a presentation today to council, just because there are some mapping and images that make it a little bit easier to explain what's going on. So just as background, and this is also provided in the official report, the planning for this started back in 2009 when the regional official plan altered the policy framework for Breslau. So it changed that area from a rural settlement area to an urban area. So following the regional official plan review, Development Services initiated a process to prepare a secondary plan for the planning of that area in Breslau. In 2016, the reports came to council to summarize the findings of that secondary plan exercise, and that also included the recommendation for a new connector road to integrate the neighborhood. In 2016, Regional Council also approved the settlement plan, secondary plan, but it only received final approval in 2017 after some appeals were settled. So following that approval, the township issued a request for proposals for the environmental assessment to determine that preferred alignment of that new connector road that was provided in the, or that was recommended in the secondary plan. And in 2019, the EA was awarded, and that brings us to the present when Infrastructure Services staff came in December 2021 with a report to council to request the endorsement of that preferred alignment of the connector road. So just as some background information, the Breslau settlement area, as you can see here, is outlined by the red line, and it includes residential, natural areas, industrial areas, and commercial. Specifically, there was a core commercial area along Woolwich Street, which I've outlined here in that yellow circle. Also, as part of the secondary plan transportation planning, there was discussion about bringing the older neighborhoods, neighborhood 1, as well as neighborhood 2 and the industrial areas together through this connector road. And that's where that proposed connector road was suggested in the secondary plan to align those two areas. Now, just opening up the Breslau transportation plan principles. So this is also as part of the report. But some of the principles required or recommended a modified grid system, a looping transportation system, and identified that there was only 2 rail crossings, and a third crossing was needed to create more of a link with the neighborhood. So this new proposed connector road would create a third rail crossing. And it would also develop a multimodal modal transportation system in the Breslau area. And that's kind of what this red line is showing, that it's a looping system for transit, for cars, for bikes, for all types of modes of transportation. So then in December 2021, the proposed alignment through the EA came through, and that's what this image here is showing. And it was also provided in the infrastructure services report that was provided to Council. And I'm just showing here, this is the settlement area outlined in the yellow, or in the red dot with the yellow shading. And this shows the preferred alignment of the proposed EA that the proposed EA had suggested for that connector road. And you can see here that it also indicates the future school site over in Hopewell Crossing and connects through to the older neighborhoods and the Empire subdivision on the other side. And just lastly, just to kind of consider the entire area as a whole, we have to look at the potential ultimate settlement limits of the area. So this is going down to the boundary of Cambridge and also the boundary of Kitchener, and then including it the full airport lands. So when planning for this area, we have to consider the long-term growth of the area through various official plans and regional official plans as well. And that's it. So I'll stop sharing and ask if there's any questions. And all of that information that I just said as well is also available in the report.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions? Councilor Merlihan.
Thank you, through you, Chair Shantz, to Ms. Fries. My initial opposition, I guess, to this connector road wasn't with the concept, or like understood the road and what the purpose was. It ended up, the deal breaker was the cost. And I think when we talked about it the first time, we asked about talking to the region, talking to the province about paying for that Metrolinx crossing as one thing, as $15 million is half the cost of what this connector road was. And that part wasn't really addressed in the new report, except that they changed the funding model, and basically that's it. For me, adding up to $5,000 for every home is for this particular connector road is kind of a bit of a deal breaker. So do you have any other updates on what kind of discussion and all that? The report indicates, perhaps costs will come in cheaper and adding density and stuff. But when we, listen to the developers before, Breslau has an additional problem with not being able to get those densities because of height restrictions in that area because of the airport. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that part of it as well, some of the things that, potentially could happen.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So this report, this road is considered a local connector road. So the purpose of the road is to connect primarily the Breslau area and create that multimodal and circular connected road. So it's not something that was identified to benefit the other municipalities for some kind of a cost sharing. Also, I would mention as well as through the development charges, these development charges to cover this road would be covered through the entire township. So not just the Breslau area, but all new development if it was included in the new development charges study as well.
Okay, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I think my concern was a little bit different than Councillor Merlihan. It was that I'm not sure that the road makes sense. And I think you've explained what the plan is. And I appreciate the work that's gone into that. But I think I'm still left with my original concern that we've got a road between two places that we want to be connected without, I don't think, a convincing argument that this road will connect them. I think, generally speaking, roads that connect two places are built when there's a need for those two places to be connected naturally and organically. You know, there's a road built between Toronto and Montreal because there's two major urban centers and they need trade, and going by boat up the St. Lawrence, it's not expedient enough. So they built railways and then they built roads. I don't see that happening here. I don't see people in New Breslau saying, I wish I could go to Old Breslau, and the only thing that's missing is a connector road. And I think that the commercial core that's on Woolwich Street, it's part of a big loop, but I don't think you're going to use the big loop just because it's there. I could see people using the multimodal trail as a loop, like if they're going to do I don't know what the loop would be, a 10K walk with their dog or something, but I don't know that a road the size that we're talking about makes sense. So I appreciate the work that's gone into this to explain what this is, but I think it's missing the argument that this is going to achieve what it's setting out to.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The area is growing. There is only one existing way to get through the settlement area from one side to another. And the settlement area secondary plan really did identify that there needs more. This area is going to have a lot more building, a lot more development in the next few years, and the existing roads that are there are not going to be enough to serve this area. This loop system will be able to spread the traffic out between the new roads and the old roads as well, and then also provide that connection with wherever that future GO station goes as well. So we have identified through the planning framework that it is needed to accommodate the development that will be going into that Breslau area.
Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. I'm going to try to do this without echoing. Try that. I disagree with Councillor McMillan. I think that we need to try to connect the two parts of Breslau. I think it's a community that is divided by Fountain Street, and I think it's important for us to bring those pieces together in order to try to help Breslau to grow into a cohesive community. So I think a connector road, I've always thought a connector road is a necessary thing. This looks like it does a good job of connecting those two pieces and future residential development that can occur.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Ms. Freeze. You showed us on one of the PowerPoint slides the settlement boundary area for Breslau expanding quite significantly. This connector road, could it not just be built out as the settlement area expands and have it be built by development as it occurs, the pieces, rather than taking a whole bunch of development charges right now? And, you know, again, like I agree with everything that Councillor McMillan talked about, you know, this being a road that will it actually connect, you know, people like we imagine it. You know, I don't know, maybe you have all sorts of wonderful, you know, feeling that people are all going to be, the dam's going to, you know, the wall is going to come down and everyone's going to hug and run to each other. I don't think that'll happen, but you know, and maybe over time, the development can do it themselves as they build out to reach that goal. The 30 million in today's dollars to make this happen and to start collecting that money for it, you know, is it's a big no-go zone for me. And then the report, I appreciate actually, there isn't a whole lot of additional information, but I appreciate the other explanation that you gave, but it doesn't really change anything for me anyway.
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just show you one more thing here. Sorry, I'm trying to get to that slide again. So if you can see on this plan, so the red line is a potential ultimate settlement limit for Breslau. The green areas are the areas that are proposed for the settlement area boundary expansion now. So those green areas are the areas that we want to connect the Breslau property area and the subdivision here and the industrial area. So the planning that we're doing right now for this connector road is for the existing settlement area boundaries and the proposed expansions that are just in this green area. In the long-term future for the ultimate Breslau settlement limits, there'll be many more roads and requirements to really access all of that area and the airport expansions and services that go with that. But right now we are just looking at this area here with the developments that are going on and the developments that are proposed for the settlement area boundaries expansions. Just end my screen share here. So by putting this road into the development charges study now, we can start collecting for it. If we wait and don't put it in, we can't collect for it, and we would lose all of that extra funding towards this road. So by putting it in now, we can start collecting and start paying that down rather than waiting and not being able to collect from all the developments that are going on now. We are going to see a lot more development in Breslau. We've got the subdivisions that we're reviewing right now that will be developed and will be contributing development charges. So now is our opportunity to get that funding as well.
Okay, if I could just have a follow-up then, just on some of the stuff you said, so we saw that rather large expansion area for the ultimate build out of Breslau. Wouldn't it make more sense then if that's our ultimate goal is to turn that all into Breslau town residential or whatever, is actually create a commercial zone in the middle there, somewhere around there, and then have things connect out the other way instead of the commercial zone that's identified in the current plan. I mean, there isn't anything there, and you're not going to have a proper downtown for many years, and that'll just take so much. Somebody will have to pour a lot of money into making a downtown area. But if the ultimate goal is to use up all that land for residential, why not plan for that now and connect all the different areas towards the center?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So in order to do settlement area boundary expansions, we have to justify it through the Planning Act on the population projected increases that need that land. So we're not at that point now where we can say that we have a need for that ultimate boundary expansion. Those are long-term plans for the area. The region will have their plans for the airport expansions, and then additional lands will be added at that time. But it's an incremental increases. It's not something that we can look at as expand the boundary now, start planning for the entire area and in a wholesome way. Although it would be a lot easier, I agree, if we could plan at all the land at the same time. It's not something that we're able to do to expand the boundaries by that much.
Thank you.
Mr. Poupé, did you have something that you wanted to add before we go back to Mr. McMillan?
Just through you, Chairman Shantz, just to support what Deanne's report's already said. When she said it's just from infrastructure services vantage point, it is a connect. We would deem it to be an important link, and I just wanted to trumpet that development is incredibly quick moving, and that is evidenced no greater than this budget year with the significant development charge deficits we're facing. So I think it is incredibly important to forward think this. to start recouping development charge monies that we can then apply those at the right time. We're not suggesting for a second that this gets built next year. I don't know the timeframes, but what I can assure council of, when we're looking at things like the Breslau wet well, Greenhouse Road, we certainly envision those things happening further into the future, but they're here and they're now. And these are very expensive projects that are being driven for development. We do not hear in our day-to-day developers complaining about the development charges in Woolwich. I appreciate that every dollar matters to business. We understand that, but this is the cost of doing that business, and I think that is important in facilitating and a growing community like Breslau. I think it is important to forward think that and to really see that. I think Dean's done a wonderful job on that larger picture, seeing what it could do and what it could be. And I think we've been faced with a lot of reactivity in this budget. Represents some of that, unfortunately, being behind in our development charges in a significant way.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan.
Thanks, Chair. Through you. I think we'd all admit that when Breslau was developed, there wasn't a cohesive plan about how the settlement was going to develop. And that's a mistake that's not nobody at the current table is responsible for. And lots of times you don't know it's going to be a mistake while you're making the decision. It's only with the benefit of hindsight that we can look back and say Breslau has grown separately and there's a new Breslau and an old Breslau. And we're trying to fix that mistake. I think another thing that we really need to think about here is the planning that has happened in the past that's gotten us to where we are. If you ask people from Breslau, from New Breslau, where are you from? They identify, I'm confident, more with being from Kitchener than from Woolwich or even Breslau. Breslau, for a lot of people there, has become a community inside of it's a bedroom community for Kitchener. It's a subdivision in Kitchener. Us trying to turn the bedroom community back into a settlement like Elmira, St. Jacobs, or Conestoga, I think it's an uphill battle. Let's say that it's an uphill battle to change that mindset from we're a subdivision of Kitchener to we are a unique town here and we're going to have a strong core that people use here in Breslau. If we're going to have a chance at creating a settlement that identifies as a settlement, and we had $30 million, is a road between two separate residential communities with no reason to go from one to the other, how you would build that cohesive unit. I still struggle to see that this plan creates one Breslau. And if we had 30, I'm not saying that a street is completely useless. I'm just saying, is it worth the cost of $30 million? Is that the best way to build a cohesive Breslau? And I hear that it's always cheaper now than in the future, and it's better to start now than wait. So my question is, can we do this in stages where maybe we procure the land, but don't commit to the $30 million? And in the future, if this road is justified by all the settlement, can we build it? Or could we say, hey, this isn't really working out the way we thought that it would?
Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. Is it anticipated this road will be built?
I'll refer that question to Jared.
Sorry, through you, Chair Shantz to Mayor Shantz. I'm not exactly sure of the timing, but I think the answer in part does respond to Councillor McMillan's as well. council would need to endorse the roadway through the EA process in order for the township to then look to purchase the land. So you would have to endorse that for us to move that forward. Timing could be at council's approval, but we would need to start acquiring and move through that. And the first step of that would be endorsing the EA and the alignment. The alignment, appreciate, has looked at a number of areas, namely environmental features. It is a difficult area. The pieces that Ms. Fries has shown here, of course, are encumbered by a whole lot of differing environmental features within the boundaries. And it was a difficult and tedious job to strike an alignment that met all the stakeholders and GRCA, DFO, ministry, and so forth, to find that balance of the road. So I think step one would be looking for council endorsement of the concept to provide a road connection, and with that alignment. And then as far as timing goes, it would be either development driving that, or council saying now's the time. But we would at least start to move forward that. We appreciate the EA has a 10-year time frame. However, that can be refreshed as we move towards that process and take steps towards the ultimate decision of the EA. So that could be expanded beyond that 10-year window. So I don't know that we have a definitive answer, but I think other than our experiences saying everything we thought was going to happen further in the future is actually happening sooner.
Go ahead, Mayor Shantz.
Good. Thanks. I have to hit too many buttons. So if we endorse this, we go ahead, we collect DCs. And 7 years from now, the council of the day says, like that road.
Sorry, Mayor Shantz, we lost your last comment there. Could you repeat that?
I'm going to try this and see if it works. Is that working okay?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay. If the council of the day, so we collect the DCs, we endorse this project, and 7 years from now, the council of the day says, we don't like this. What happens?
You, Chairman Shantz, to Mayor Shantz, would have to, I want to be careful. I'm not 100% sure. I appreciate that there is a reconciliation of development charges. So if projects are touted to be at a certain dollar amount and come in under, there's a reconciliation that occurs, and that goes both ways, plus and minus with that. So as far as the costing goes, you have estimated costs, and your DC charges are based on that, with reconciliations occurring at least every 5 years or through an amendment of some form. So that could speak to the cost piece. I believe that if a future council, so if this council did elect to move forward, we would continue to do that. We would include that in our development charges background study. It's possible that another council may have to amend the EA or open up an EA, and we'd go through that other process to remove that connector road. But I will need to confirm that with staff and report back to council on exactly that process.
I guess where I was going is what happens to the money that's been collected? Can we put it towards a different road? No.
And I'm very happy to see the Director of Finance, Mr. Petherick, show up on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the way Jared was describing it was really along the right framework. So what happens is when we collect the DCs, they sit within our development charges reserve, and specifically for the public works road section. And if a future council decides that they want to change direction, monies would still have been collected and should be theoretically sitting in our reserve fund. So if council changes their mind and says, nope, we don't want to do it anymore, and we don't want to do anything else of the like, through that reconciliation, you would see, I would call like a reduction in that public works road charge is what I would expect to see. But council, of course, through the future amendments or future development charge background studies, could also in turn add roads that may be in place of that. And therefore it would work out in that reconciliation, whether it be the exact cost or something more, something different, but it would all be captured, in a future study.
Thank you. So then my next question is, so suppose we don't go ahead with the DCs now, and 7 years from now, we want to put a road in, then we have to debenture, correct?
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, I would say you're definitely in that realm. But Mr. Chairman, I would add though that debenture still would be paid through future development charges. It would still be on the development.
But going forward.
Correct.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Merlahan, did you have a further comment?
Yeah, through you, I guess to whoever wants it. Last time we talked about this particular connector road, part of the argument was, it was going to help with the airport. It was going to connect the GO station and such. The developer, Thomasfield, has, although they had an agreement with Metrolinx, they don't have any plans on paying for the GO station themselves, or is because and say there aren't enough development charges to make that go. And I believe staff was looking at alternative locations. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Alternative locations, the GO station, sorry. And if you could speak to that and the benefit of the road in an alternative GO station configuration.
You, Mr. Chair. So yes, the region is looking with Metrolinx at alternative locations as other options, but regardless of where that GO station ends up being, this loop system we still feel will provide that connectivity and the access to the GO station. So whether or not the GO station is on the Thomasfield lands or it's in the near proximity, it will still be somewhere in the proximity of Breslau and would still benefit from the connector road.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have locations yet as where the other locations are.
Councillor Redekop, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I would be in favor of the plan and continuing with the environmental assessment program. We've talked about that, that we're part of a difficult planning process where we didn't have a place that would be centralized for Breslau, and I think this offers an opportunity to connect the two. Whether I don't think they're connected right now, but I think this gives us an opportunity. And if we market well enough, then I think Breslau might come to the understanding that this would be a good project for them to come together, because it is a very disparate community. And Councillor McMillan's comment about that Breslau is a subdivision of Kitchener. When we were talking about when the gentleman, Mr. McLeod, was here to talk about electric cars, he named it that we're all a suburban community. Like we're St. Jacobs, Elmira. So I go back that I would endorse this project because I think it's important to attempt to bring these two parts of the community together.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, one last quick one, Chair. Thank you, through you. The last time this project came to us, we were talking about the possibility of having a commercial corridor on the connector road. And I think that was a plan that I could see that would give the people from Breslau a reason to get on the road. I don't see a connection between two subdivisions that doesn't go anywhere. I don't see it as a reason for people to get on it unless it gives them a shortcut somewhere. So was that explored, and why didn't that work to have the commercial core be on this connector road?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So no, that wasn't looked at to have a commercial area there because the central commercial core area that was identified in the settlement area secondary plan, really that the Breslau area can only really support one commercial core settlement area, and that area was already starting to be established. So it makes sense to expand on the area that's already there rather than trying to add a second commercial area, but try to cluster the development. And then there's more residential uses that we're looking at along that connector road, as well as the connection between the industrial lands as well.
Chair Shantz, just a quick follow-up. I think that makes sense. I think it makes sense to not try to have two separate cores, but I think we can't say the same thing I don't think we can say both things at the same time. That we can't have a separate core and we need to connect them with this road. I don't think that those two ideas coexist. And I think I understand getting on development charges early. I get that, but the project has to make sense. So I'm struggling here.
Okay, while you continue to struggle, I just have a couple of questions or a comment. One, I just saw in Ryan's report that the land acquisition is $250,000 an acre. Is that a lot of commercial property, or it seems to me it should be a lot of agricultural land, and that's pretty pricey for agricultural land, is it not? Thanks, Ryan.
Through you to you, Chair Shantz. That was just an estimate that our consultant did based on just bulk land in the area. So it wasn't anything specific to look and say this was a future commercial area. It was just an average sale price for real estate for land in the area. That's how that was come up with.
Okay, thank you. And my other comment, I guess, and not really a question, but more a comment and possibly a question, I guess. Highway 7 is going to be a service road eventually when the new highway, or Victoria Street is going to be a service road when the new Highway 7 goes through. And how does that figure in all of this? Because there's not going to be a lot of traffic on that road. And would that be able to take the place of this corridor road, or is it out of the way too far?
So just in response to that, I can share the transportation plan again, but it is available in your agenda package. But yeah, that would be another connection, but it's a different spot. So it's the connector road that we're looking at right now is needed where it is, and that would be a little bit too much further away from where we're looking at. I don't know if that totally answers your question, but.
Yeah, I guess my question was more with traffic volume on number 7 now, or Victoria Street the way it is, will probably really decrease. And so then it's not going to be near as busy. And then that could be part of the connecting system rather than this connector road, if that would help.
So that is part of the whole transportation plan for the area and is seen for needing both.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, or we do have a recommendation here? I'm not seeing any. So does somebody want to move the recommendation? Mayor Shantz? Councillor Martin, are you seconding it, or do you have a comment or question?
I was going to say, I think by Councillor Redekop's comments, he would have moved the recommendation without saying so, but we can go at it this way. I'd be glad to second it if Mayor Shantz moved it.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Any further discussion? Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, I'll just be real quick. I think you've heard my justification. I'm not going to support this, but I want to thank staff for the work that went into it. I think that there is a plan here that I could support, maybe, but the way it's written right now, I can't, but I do appreciate the work that went into this, and it looks like I'm going to lose anyway. So I just wanted to say thanks for the work.
Okay, thank you on their behalf. Any other further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And those opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. General amendments to the Township Landscape and Design Guidelines. Next, we have Mr. Vink back with us this evening to provide council with an overview of his second report. Mr. Vink.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. As you are aware, a few years ago, we passed had council with the first round of the landscape design guidelines. Every so often, we do like to go back and take a look at things as things do change. In this case, we did go through, there's some minor spelling corrections we've looked at, but also some of the bigger concerns that came up were the street trees. Our parks and recreation staff have noted that there's some concerns with some of the street trees and maintenance and recommending the removal. One is there's some concerns that it might become invasive. So that's why we're moving the pears and the hackberries out of the street tree list. Just to compensate, I did look at other municipalities if there's other trees we don't have on our list. So we saw the Japanese cherry as being introduced in and around the area. So we thought maybe that'd be an alternative to add another tree into our list to replace those that we're taking off. So as mentioned, yeah, the pears are potentially invasive and the hackberry was just becoming a bit of a nuisance and harder to maintain than we thought. So taking that one off the list for that reason. Hackberry will remain as a park tree, however, it will do well in the parks, better than the streets. Also in this, we're just taking a look at our parking lots and our site plan design guideline elements. As council knows, we require 1 tree for every 5 parking spaces in our site plans for our commercial and industrial lands. This has become a big problem ever since it was introduced. We have had constant resistance on this and challenges trying to meet those tree planting requirements. So just taking a look at it, we decided to tweak the wording a little bit by just, as you see in the report, by just changing the wording, trying to give a little more emphasis that if they can't achieve the 1 for every 5, that they provide some alternative treatment on terms of instead of asphalt, or still give some flexibility that, you know, sometimes these trees are and the parking spaces are near the edge of the perimeter. We can compensate with the perimeter trees and still achieve the overall intent to reduce the heat island impact. So just that minor wording change. As noted in the report, though, staff does note this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on and maintain and determine, you know, what might have to happen in the future. Additional changes might need to be made. Also, since we had the opportunity, we've added in a few requirements around making sites EV charger ready. So we've suggested that to develop, we're going to suggest that now in these design guidelines, as well as adding bicycle parking locations. So those are suggestions and not requirements. Because we don't have anything in policy or in our zoning yet to make the requirements, they are just the recommendations that we'll be making as we move through site plans. As noted, we want to do these reviews every so often. So we'll probably do another review in a year or two. Once the zoning bylaw update is done, we can make some more additional changes. And then once our official plan is redone, we're going to start on that bigger picture project for Elmira, St. Jacobs, et cetera. We'll probably do a major redo in about 3 to 5 years. So any questions from council? I'll be free to answer them.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to take a minute. We're just setting up Mayor Shantz in a new location with a different mic. So give us 30 seconds to test this, and that'll allow you to think of your questions for Mr. Vink.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a lot better. So, okay, any questions for Mr. Vink? Councilor Merlehan.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Vink. Looking at the bike parking spaces, it refers to people having to provide good quality racks. I'm wondering if good quality can be defined a little bit more specific. I've taken complaints over the years from developers just about things not being specific, and then they have, and let's say it's landscaping related, and then they put their plans together and get people to draw up the plans, and then the township says, no, that's not what we were thinking, change it, and then it costs them money every time. I'm wondering if we could actually have like a model or two models of bike racks so that there could be consistency throughout the township, and something more defined as to what the quality we're after, because lots of people have different ideas of that. And then my other question on the bike racks would be also, how do you determine how many bike racks would be required for a development? And I understand that you just said that this isn't all the way enforceable or whatever their guidelines for these ones, but I'm just wondering what planning was thinking there.
Yes, through Mr. Chair to Councillor Merlehan. Definitely, we are going to be looking at some sort of standard like a parking requirement of how many spaces we would ask for bicycle parking relative to the overall required parking. So that'll be coming in our new zoning bylaw. We haven't set a standard at this point, but right now we'd probably be looking like, would depend on the use, obviously. If it was more of a commercial use, we'd probably be looking for, 3 or 4 parking spaces for bicycles. If it's an industrial property, maybe just 1 or 2, because many people bike into the industrial area at this time. But and definitely we can put in some ideas around good quality, especially we're looking for something that's metal, that's easy for the bikes to hook up to. There's various different kinds out there, and that's what we want to make sure they were just quality ones that were useful in that sense that we want to see. And so we can add some samples.
Okay, great. And then my other question would be around the trees, the swapping out of trees. I was wondering if our tweak group was consulted on the choosing of trees and such.
Through you again, Mr. Chair. So the tweak wasn't consulted at this point. Recreation staff, as well as a member of the public, did comment on the trees they wanted removed. So that's where the concerns are coming from actual in the ground activities taking place in our street trees. So our tree pruner on the street trees had concerns on those with the one tree, as well as the invasive one. And then a resident was raising concerns about the pears. So we had it from different sources that we determined that we should be reducing those trees out of our street tree requirements. Like I said, we added in the Japanese cherry as an alternative, realizing though the street tree list we have is not exhaustive. We actually do allow flexibility in our guidelines that somebody could come in and say there is a tree that was referenced in another design manual that we reference in the report in our guidelines that can be used. So they can pick other trees. So we're not limiting it just to these trees necessarily, but these are the key ones we're looking for. A lot of them are native, and we do place heavy requirements on looking for native trees to be at least 50% in any case, if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. I do have a question for clarification, and that is in the development section for topsoil requirements. And I leafed through this. I didn't read it word for word, but I think it was on the last page it got into that. And it talked about just going with the Landscape Ontario standards. Is that correct, or did we do something more over and above that standard?
So yes, Mr. Chair, we did go above and beyond that. So I'm not quite sure where you're reading, but there is other elements in the guidelines within our street tree and our new subdivisions for topsoil standards in terms of the depth. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it is. I think it's 450 millimeters is a requirement in our front yards and our boulevards, but it's in there. I just can't remember exactly where it is.
Okay, I guess I just went into the very last one where it went into the development, and I think it was on page 84 or something like that, where it talked about meeting the Landscape Ontario. And there they talked about nothing larger than 75 millimeters. And that's like 3 inches. That's a pretty hefty stone or rock, whatever you want to call it. It talks about the debris and things like that. And I thought we went further than that and wanted screening, like a 3/4 inch screen. But maybe I was looking in the wrong location. This is on the very last page of the report.
Okay. I could take another look, but yeah, we did ask for screen topsoil requirements. I just don't know exactly where it is off the top of my head. It's fairly lengthy, as you are well aware. So,
yeah.
But yes, there is requirements around screening and maximum sizes, which are, I think, it implemented what council requested back about when we implemented the design guidelines and the changes back in 2019.
Okay, good enough. I just wanted to make sure that that it was there. So thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. And I hope this works a little bit better now. My question is, first of all, the report is very comprehensive. And so my question is regarding flexibility, and maybe a question as to, was this entirely crafted for this area, or is a lot of it sort of just standard design guidelines that you would put in anywhere? And if that's the case, then how will we interpret those that are just sort of put in there because they're standard guidelines when we have situations that might be a bit different?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Shantz. So good question. They are standard, so they're very relative. They are very consistent with some of the other neighboring municipalities. Our exception would be probably like that our street requirements for land for parking lots at the 1 to 5 is higher than most in around here. To be honest, it is more of a Toronto or GTA standard. So does staff take some flexibility? Yes, it's a guideline. The report is a guide. What you have in front of you is a guideline. So staff does work with it, and we try to achieve the guideline. And then as we look at the site, we look at what is reasonable. Okay. So on a redevelopment of a site, it's harder to achieve all these requirements than a greenfield site. So we're going to be a little pushier on a greenfield site than a site that's redeveloping with an addition. The same as when we're doing landscape, we're doing site plans for the farm businesses. We're going to treat them a little bit differently than the industrial area in town or the commercial area, for example. So key areas, we will be more rigid a little bit to make it look better, especially on main roads, things like that. So we do take some flexibility as much as we can, but we also try aim first to hit the guidelines as best we can before we kind of drop ourselves down on a standard sometimes.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that we're not implementing standards that are set up for a big city here if it doesn't fit. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Vink? I'm not seeing any. We do have a recommendation before us to consideration. So do I have a mover and a seconder on that? Councillor McMillan, someone on a second that? Councillor Redekop, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is passed. Next, we're going to go into the budget approval. Director of Finance, Mr. Richard Hethrick, is going to lead us in that. But before we do that, I've asked Councillor Redekop to chair this portion of the meeting. So Councillor Redekop, when you're ready, you can take over.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Shantz. Yes, so I'll turn it over to Richard to give us an update on our budget approval process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So through our various budget meetings for the 2022 budget, staff is in a position to bring forward the final consolidated version of the 2022 budget. The changes through our various meetings have been primarily within the tax-supported operating budgets and the capital budgets, which put us in a position of having an increase of 5.87%. So the various changes that came up to that was, I think as the report indicates, there were a number of additions and subtractions to the corporate services grant budget, but more specifically, council decided to take out the $56,000 that was in the financial services budget that was put in 2021 for the Woolwich COVID Relief Fund. In addition to that, council also, still within the financial services budget, made a decision to put in an additional 1.5% for the infrastructure levy. So what that does for that 5.87% is puts the base down to 2.02 from the original 2.5% that we came into the draft budget with. The infrastructure levy went from 1.5% to 3%, and the climate action greening infrastructure levy still remained at 0.85%. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to hand it back to you and take any questions from council.
You have any questions for Mr. Petherick? Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Richard. Where did you get the idea that you were instructed to go with 3% for infrastructure? It was just a suggestion. I think Councillor Shantz just threw out a number. And when we had a little discussion, he said, well, maybe that's not the right number, maybe 0.5% or something. And all of a sudden, when I read through this today, we've put it right in there that 3%. And I don't think that's accurate.
Through Mr. Chairman, apologize if I didn't read council correctly or if I misheard something. That was the direction that I did hear. And it was just a direction to come back. I mean, it's obviously a direction that council has ultimately can change their mind on whether they want to have the 3%, whether they want to have a 0%, whether they want to have somewhere in between the recommended what we had before 1.5%. So this is just, I think, some of the things that are heard as we were going through the budget deliberations. But by all means, if I misheard, I apologize, but council can definitely make whatever decision they want to with regards to this.
Mayor Shantz, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to affirm what Mr. Petherick just said, that we did throw out the 3%, and that's what we discussed, and that's what I expected to come back. But I'm not necessarily expecting that we're going to land there. This is here for us to have another chance to discuss it. So that's why it's in there, and certainly we can discuss it. And I'm expecting that Councillor Shantz might want to weigh in.
Councillor McMillan, and then, sorry, well, go with Murray. You had a follow-up, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Well, I'll make it clear that the 3% doesn't upset me, but our definition of infrastructure does. And unless that definition changes, I won't support it.
Okay. Councillor McMillan, go ahead. And then Mayor Shantz.
I also want to talk about the infrastructure levy. I don't know, do we want to see what we agree on first before we start disagreeing, or I don't know how we want to do this, but I thought it was a really good conversation that we had. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago, regarding the 1.5%? I think Councillor Shantz got us going with a really good conversation by putting that number out there. I would support a 1.5% increase to 3%, but I also think that this is a really important step that we're taking. And I could also, if I heard Councillor Merlehan say he'd be agreeable to some increase, but not 1.5. And I think I heard Councillor Martin say that his arm could be twisted to 0.5%. I think if we could build a consensus or a greater majority with a lower number, I'd be more in support of that rather than a hard 3-2 vote at 1.5%. So I think that we need to get there at some point. Our infrastructure deficit is running away from us. What if we do 1.5% now? I think that is the right thing to do. But I could also support 0.5% this year with the commitment from this council that we're going to do another 0.5% next year and 0.5% the year after, and gradually phase it in. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with a little bit more consensus. More consensus is an oxymoron, but get closer to consensus than just a 3-2 hard vote here tonight on that.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor McMillan. Mayor Shantz, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was interested in Councillor Martin's definition for the infrastructure levy, what he was proposing that he would like to see as that definition. And yeah, I guess for now, that's it.
Councillor Martin, do you want to respond or think about it?
Yeah, I guess I'll respond. When we
Okay.
first went through this or down this road, it was in the days of the late Mr. Gosney. And I can remember he put out a chart and he said, if we add 1.5% this year, that's how much money we're going to get. Year two, we're going to add 1.5% again. And we're also going to have 1.5% on the 1.5% that we made the year before. The next year, we're going to get 1.5% plus 1.5% plus 1.5% plus 1.5%. And he went out about 9-10 years. And he came up, I can remember, it's about $1 million. And that was back in the days when if you had $1 million to spend, you could get a lot of work done. That's no longer the case. And that's what we sold the people on. Roads, bridges, hard infrastructure. And we've got away from that. And we didn't have much opposition with the 1.5% increase because we made it quite clear that that's what we're going to do. And we had a road needs study. And we came along with the idea that if we do 2 projects a year, and with this extra money that we're raising, maybe every 3 years, we could do another project just to help us get over the hump a bit. And we haven't done that. That's why I don't like our definition of infrastructure. It just seems that when we have a pile of money there, oh, we can take it from here. And that's not what we had in mind when we went down this road.
Mr. Brenneman, go ahead.
Yeah, my apologies, but I do have to correct history. It wasn't Mr. Gosney that introduced the infrastructure levy. When Mr. Gosney was still with us, we introduced the recreation levy that allowed us to implement the ambitious recreation facilities and building projects that we had. We didn't bring an infrastructure levy report to the council until Mayor Cowan and that council was in office. At that point, we wrote a specific report that said, on the basis that we had success in introducing a recreation levy and what that was able to be achieved, we introduced the concept of an infrastructure levy to Mayor Cowan and council of the day. At that time, as I previously reported, we did report and it was accepted by the council of the day. I know that subsequent councils have outlined a concern with the approach. And while the policy has never been changed, certainly council's direction has been clear and changed. But when we originally, as senior management, brought forward the infrastructure levy in that particular council, it was, yes, correct. We looked at our roads needs study, our bridge needs study. We also looked at the fact that we had developed a very ambitious capital facilities program and would need ultimately to maintain this infrastructure. So we recommended not only roads and bridges, but also our facilities in terms of preventative maintenance program, and also another area that has since been very controversial, the whole notion that we would need to invest in our IT infrastructure. That's ultimately what we did take to the public of the day as part of some budget consultations that we went around to various communities. As I said, I know from a senior management perspective, we've heard from subsequent councils that they do not support or some members of council have noted that they do not support that broad of interpretation for use of the infrastructure levy. But I also would note that this council, as part of this budget process, did speak and debate the issue of whether the infrastructure levy should still consistently be broadened enough to make sure we are still maintaining our recreation and also our facilities structures, such as our fire halls, our public works yards, and things of that nature. So I just wanted, my apologies, Councillor Martin, but I needed to correct that because, the difference, there was a difference in terms of timing when various councils dealt with things. The council that I first worked with that you were on did deal with the recreational capital levy. And then, as I said earlier, we introduced the infrastructure levy the following next term under that council. Council can certainly continue to revise the direction in which it wants to take in terms of how that infrastructure levy is dealt with. But as I've stated before, the original policy that was adopted and has not been officially changed did speak to those three areas. But certainly subsequent councils in voting on various budgets have resisted obviously using money in some of the IT areas, but not so much in my recollection with respect to the roads, bridges, or even in terms of some of our facilities improvements.
Thank you, David. Mayor Shantz, you had a comment or no? No. Okay, I thought I saw your hand. Okay, Larry, Councillor Shantz, you want to make a comment or a question?
Yeah, thank you. I do have comments to make. And I think it was back a number of weeks ago that I suggested we could increase the infrastructure levy, and Mayor Shantz asked me by how much, and I said double it. So I just threw the number out wildly, and I have to apologize now to Councillor McMillan, because I think after he picked himself up off the floor, I think he had to dust himself off. But anyway, I just have some comments, and I first want to thank the staff for the work that they've done again on this year's budget. This is my 8th budget, and things have definitely changed over the years. When I saw my first budget in 2014, it had 5 years of projected forecasts and no year's previous budget numbers. That was subsequently changed by my request to show previous year's actuals, which makes it much easier to follow trends. However, this year was not without change again. For the first time, Council pre-endorsed a 4.85% increase and sent staff off to prepare a budget. It felt to me like the 2022 budget was already passed in August, long before we had a chance to see any numbers. I know how hard staff work to prepare the budget every year, but it causes me to wonder what the budget may have looked like without the pre-endorsement. I did vote against that process and the 4.85% guideline for an increase. Some council members have commented that this was an easier budget year, but I have to say that the complete opposite. For me, I found it difficult to ask for cuts when we set the initial target at 4.85. Since this is an election year, I would suggest we do not follow the same process for 2023. Let's not make a predetermination for a new council. Part of this budget includes a debenture for the Peel Street Bridge in Winterburn. There were inferences made that I did not want to support the heritage value of the bridge. That is simply not true. I wanted to do more with the structure and in turn for the broader community. However, the way the bridge sits in its current state, it is safe, and we are preserving heritage without needing to inject any more money. The reason it had what some would say ugly barriers installed was because people were not respecting the fact that the bridge was closed to all kinds of traffic, including pedestrians. If council is interested in spending the equivalent of 1.5 in the budget to carry a debenture on this bridge, I would ask that council reconsider this decision and reallocate the 1.5 and put it towards the special infrastructure levy instead. This would allow future councils to decide if they want to continue with the 1.5 increase or not. Unlike a debenture, which would tie the hands of 4 or more future councils forcing them to spend the equivalent of 1.5% budget dollars each year just to pay the $1.5 million debt. And that's if interest rates remain at an all-time low. The bridge is safe. Heritage has been preserved. We are in the final year of this council, so I'm asking once again to reconsider and defer the Peel Street Bridge debenture for future consideration. Maybe we will be the beneficiary of some grant monies in the future, like we were with the Glasgow Street Bridge in Conestoga, at which time the project could move forward. I have to say I will not support the operating capital budget if this debenture is kept intact, and I would also ask that we have a recorded vote. And that's the end of my comments.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Shantz. Councillor Merlehan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I guess just general comments. Part of the discussion on the infrastructure, the 3% now that's in the budget, it all stems from, the first time we're really grappling with debentures. I've struggled with this, and I know Councillor Shantz has struggled with this, and we have different areas of concern, but in the end of the day, we don't want to saddle future residents with paying all sorts of interest. I agree with that. Is when I look at some of where the debentures are coming from, and I'm wondering if this is something that council would consider, is we spend the money that we have for the most part, and if projects have to go, then projects have to go. And what I would suggest for this next year is Industrial Drive in Elmira. Downtown Elmira is in a lot worse shape than Industrial Drive, and that would account for 1.175 in debentures starting next year. So that's a project in Elmira. It's a bit of a there's water and sewer and all that kind of stuff involved there, but I say we push it off until next year and forego the debenture on that as one other thing. As far as Peel Street Bridge goes, we made a promise to the community. We knew at the time debenture was the only option. We made those decisions. Council made that decision at the time, and I can live with that debenture. But I'm just wondering if people want to comment about Industrial Drive, if they would support foregoing that project.
Any comments to Councillor Merlehan's comment? Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
It's just a question to staff. The Industrial Drive, the timing of that had to do around Arthur with the region. And is there, can you comment about any cost savings with that timing? And are we going to be taking on a bigger project by doing it later?
Mr. Boupé, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chairman Redekop, to Councillor McMillan and Councillor Merlehan. There was thought put into the timing for Industrial Drive. I think it's important to note that the debenture that we're looking at in Industrial Drive is a sewer debenture. It is not a levy debenture. So that is caught up in future years with water and sewer rates. That is different than levy debentures. I would make that point. We do have problems on Industrial Drive, frozen laterals, frozen services that we do spend time on. We also have pedestrian connectivity issues. And to Councillor McMillan's point is we are very cognizant of the region's timing. And at this point, what they're indicating is likely to bleed out over longer years. We already know that Church Street will be done over at least 2 years. Arthur Street will likely be done over multiple years as well. So that does start to impact different roads in our we have Duke Street planned for next year as well. So we start to run into a crunch problem, and continuing to kick that can, so to speak, down the road will eventually catch up. We already have significant debentures coming in 2023 So it certainly is council's decision if they want to do that. But it will become problematic for us. And I guess from a levy or a venture perspective, we see that this does have a funding source eventually, like development charges, albeit it is the users of the water and sewer system, unlike levy, where there is nothing there other than increasing in levy dollars or receiving upper government funding.
Thank you, Mr. Boupe, for clarifying that. Councilor Martin, did you have a comment?
I don't support pulling Industrial Drive out. At least there we're getting value for our money. And let me say about the Peel Street Bridge, I agree with what Councilor Sean said. And I know Councilor Merlehan said we promised the people that we do it this year. He's the only one that promised the people we would. The mayor said maybe we can move it ahead. He's shaking his head, but no, I didn't do it. Larry didn't do it, so who's left? Answer that. It's not a good investment. But I wrote down earlier today that I really applaud the idea that we have recorded vote, which Councilor Merlehan suggested the other week. I'm not sure what purpose that serves because the vote's been the same every time we voted on it. But then I came to the conclusion, well, you can either try to make two people look bad because they didn't support it, so you got it in a recorded vote. I'll look in the future, 15, 20 years down the road, when this bridge needs a whole lot more work or maybe has to be closed. Maybe has to be closed. And then when you look at the cost of doing it, redoing it or building a new one, the people are going to scream and say, why didn't the previous council look at it when they had the chance? That's when the recorded vote's going to look good because it'll look good on the people and we'll know who didn't support it and who had no vision.
Councilor Shantz, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to bring back the recommendation, or I guess the motion, and the last part of the motion said, and after that financing decision for the rehabilitation be held until development and approval of the 2022 budget, so that better construction cost estimates can be established to help inform the overall funding options for this project, which may include the use of additional federal gas tax funding. So we did not promise it. It was promised that we would look at it, but we did not promise to do the job.
Councilor Merlehan, go ahead.
Yeah, through you. General comments about how this meeting's going. I've been called saying things that have been uncalled for. I'm unbecoming of my office. And, anytime somebody has a little hissy fit, like we just witnessed, there's nobody chairing this, bringing this back to order. I don't understand that, there's all sorts of speculation about why, recorded votes are happening. It's like, don't put words in my mouth, Councilor Martin. We're, as part of a meeting, we are allowed to ask for recorded votes. There's no making people look bad or anything. That is the process that we are part of. So I don't really know why this is part of this budget meeting. If you feel bad because you think you look bad in a decision, that's your problem. That is not anybody else's problem. And so if we could just, if whoever's chairing this meeting, it'd be nice to, let's stick to the budget and less about personalities. Yeah, I am one person on this council. We vote together. There was like 3 people that voted for the Peel Street Bridge. That means it's a council decision. It's not my decision. And when we make a promise to the community, that's council voting, making a promise to the community. So if that's too hard to understand, I don't really know, how to explain it any more simple. But this isn't Councillor Merlehan's decision about the Peel Street Bridge. I'm on the losing end of most votes for the past 8 years. So, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Maybe get used to it or something. I don't know. It's just, please,
Okay.
let's just talk about,
That's
let's
good.
talk about the budget and get back to infrastructure. 3% is something that, you know, I'm not going to support the 3% extra on the infrastructure. You know, you're looking at adding 176,000 when we have like way more in debentures. It's hardly going to make a tick there on our big sliding scale that Treasurer Petherick put together for what the interest charges are going to be. So we make hard decisions. I suggested that Industrial Drive is one that we could look at. This is the first I'm hearing that it's a sewer debenture. I guess I'm wondering, you know, why can't that debenture be a self one if it's coming out of sewers and user rates for that? Why can't we instead of, you know, going to the bank for that charge, self-finance that and do it much quicker? And we just raised our sewer rates. Imagine those new rates would cover some of that. Maybe somebody could talk about that.
Mr. Petherick or Mr. Poupé? Mr. Petherick, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I think the first thing to say is the debenture for Industrial Drive it's because we don't have enough in our reserve funds for sewer. That's why we're needing that debenture. If we had the funds, then we would be self-funding it. The other thing too is to remember that we're going to potentially be taking on somewhere around $1 million. That would be our cost for the Breslau Drain 1. We already are taking on an internal debt from 2021, about $727,000, I believe. So taking on continual internal debt is just not sustainable for us. We just don't have the cash flow to continue to do that. You know, I think, as I said, you know, we're able to accomplish that in 2021. We're going to be able to accomplish the Breslau Drain 1 as an internal debt, but we are going to have to be looking externally, specifically for Industrial Drive. And it is the sewer component, because we don't have enough money in the sewer reserve fund to accomplish the sewer works that need to be done on that project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. Councillor Shantz and then Councillor McMillan.
But can you clarify, does that debenture go for 15 years or does it only go as long as we need to pay it back?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, that would be determined, I think, as we start to look at the various scenarios, depending on the interest rate, we can make that decision whether it's a 10, 15 or 20-year debenture. So we can shorten that or spread that out as much as council desires.
But it will be locked in at some point. It's not something that we can pay back prematurely.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Through you, Mr. Chairman, when we get into that debenture repayment schedule, we are locked into it.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just want to say regarding the Peel Street Bridge, I think it's important in a budget process that councillors get to go on record and say why they're voting a certain way. We are heading into an election year, and we've all got to be able to stand up on our record. So I certainly support people standing up and saying why they want or don't want something. But fundamentally, nothing has changed between when we had that rigorous process that we went through in the fall and what we're going through now. So I think that I still support the Peel Street Bridge. I don't think that anything has fundamentally changed there. It does sound like Industrial Drive makes sense to do this now. So I think it'd be hard to pull either one of these projects off the books right now.
So let's get back to the Larry sort of just put out a number, 3%, doubling our infrastructure levy. It doesn't sound like that's going to be possible from the comments I've heard from councillors. So Richard put it in there because that's what he heard, and he didn't hear anything against it at their recent budget process meetings. So I've heard 0.5%, maybe up to 2%, or maybe we just want to keep it at 1.5 like we have the last few years. So do you have any comments about where we want to go with the infrastructure levy? It's been a good discussion. Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. I just said I support the Peel Street Bridge, and I still do. I think we need to have some type of increase on our infrastructure levy if we're going to have those ambitious projects. So while certainly I think this is an important decision, and it would be, I certainly want to help get more people on board with it. And if a number below 1.5% additional levy infrastructure increase does that, that's great. But we have to have some increase on that levy infrastructure. I don't think leaving it the same and taking on debenture and taking on really worthwhile projects like the Peel Street Bridge makes sense. So I can't support all of those projects and leaving the infrastructure levy where it is.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on where we want the infrastructure levy to be at in this budget? Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said originally, I just threw out a number of weeks ago, and I do like the idea, the approach that Councillor McMillan is suggesting, that maybe we stage it over a few years. That softens the blow a little bit, but I agree we do have to increase it somewhere along the line. Whatever that number is, I'm not sure at this point.
Mayor Shantz, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify about the infrastructure levy, because it is cumulative. And so whatever we decide on this year doesn't mean that that's the amount that we do next year. And in the same way, if we add 0.5% this year and 0.5% next year, we can do that. And I think we talked about that many years ago, that we would increase it incrementally, and then we dropped it back, and then we increased it again. So I think we need to look at what we want to do today and let future councils decide what they're going to do in the future. And I'm not sure what the right number is yet. So I'll stop for the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. I suggested a week or two ago that I would support 0.5%, and I'm not going to move that.
So that would be 2% that you would on the levy, okay? In the infrastructure levy, okay?
Yeah,
thank you.
Let future councils deal with it at budget time if they want to increase it.
Okay. Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I certainly understand what the mayor is saying. I also think, short of building something like the WMC or tearing down a bridge, future councils aren't bound by anything that we do. And I think that if we make the commitment, it at least gets things pointed in the right direction, and or what we might deem as the right direction, and it would set that for future councils. So I could go as low as 0.5%, but I would like to have council at least make the commitment that we would have an additional 0.5% increase for the next 2 years following to get to, at least 3%. I'm not even sure at 3% we're going to be closing the gap on our infrastructure deficit, but at least if I think that's a pretty bold statement by this council if we do 0.5% this year, and affirm our desire to see 0.5% increase each of the next 2 years. That's at least getting us going further down the right path.
So we'll make recommendations for this budget year. So I've heard it may be from two councillors, 2% of the infrastructure levy rather than 3%. Any other comments? Councillor Merlehan, go ahead, and then Councillor.
Yeah, through you, I have a question through you to Mr. Petherick. So since the inception, we're talking about the cumulative effect of the percents and all that sort of thing. What are we up to right now from the initial introduction? Like we must be like what, 15 or more percent? Like this is a tax, right? So
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, cumulatively, I think we've been 13.1% that I can see since the inception in 2012.
okay, so then if we went to, and is that including this year or that? No, okay, so we'll be more or less 15% somewhere in there. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Councillor Shantz and then Mayor Shantz.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing that Councillor McMillan said. And he said anything we decide, future councils are not bound for that. But if we do debenture, future councils are bound by that. So that's where I'm coming from. If we make that debenture decision, then we're strapping future councils with that decision. If we put it in an infrastructure levy, then they can take it out if they want, but they can't take out a debenture.
Okay, Mayor Shantz, you had a comment? Or no?
Yeah, thank you. I can certainly support 2%, which is an additional 0.5% to where we started our discussions. I'm still not totally opposed to a 3% infrastructure levy. We've known for years that we've got an infrastructure deficit and that we have to deal with it. And we've been asking other levels of government to help us, and they've come to the table to some extent. It's a problem that's across the province and I suppose probably the country. So I still have not totally made up my mind. I know I can support 2%. I might still be able to support 3%. The other thing about debentures, and I understand the hesitancy to borrow. That's sort of a common thing for a lot of people. But I've come to understand that a debenture also creates a situation where the people who are using a piece of infrastructure are paying for it. So the future users are paying for that infrastructure. So I'm not totally opposed to debenturing, and I think we have a very conservative debenture policy. So the debenturing that we're doing, I think, is very targeted, and I don't have a problem with that. The other thing I wanted to touch on is our tax rate, and I know that's not a reason to say it's okay to increase taxes, but I want to also point out again that we do have the lowest tax rate of all of our local municipalities, and whichever percentage we land on, we will in all likelihood still have the lowest tax rate. And so that gives me some comfort in moving forward that we're not out of line.
So do we, is a question for the clerk, do we need to vote on this week? Because we have a sober second thought for a week. So there, I noticed in the agenda, there's no recommendation. Is there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a recommendation in front of council tonight. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we've had a mover or seconder for that motion.
No, we have not.
You have had a recorded vote requested.
Yeah.
The recommendation is listed on Mr. Petherick's report, FO5 2022.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I believe that includes the 3% capital levy as well as the other numbers that Mr. Petherick has talked about.
Yeah.
So if council wished to amend that or change that recommendation, then we could take a vote on that if council was ready.
Okay. Are we ready to make a decision on the amount of the infrastructure levy? Councilor Merlehan, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, through you, I just have one more question for Treasurer Petherick. Can you just do the quick math here on the amount of tax that we're doing? So you just talked about the infrastructure levy. So add that plus the assessment growth that we've had this year. I think it was somewhere in the 9% area. Is that, or maybe I'm thinking of a couple things combined. That's why I'm asking you to put that number together so I don't look foolish.
Mr. Chairman, yeah. So new assessment growth is coming in at 4.29%. So the 9 is kind of what you're looking at, and that's the total levy. So looking at the 5.87% plus the 4.29%. So that's why you're kind of in around 10%. If we were to leave the infrastructure levy at 3%.
Okay, so we're at like 25% tax.
10.
with the infrastructure levy. So the accumulative effect, that's, we're getting $1.2 million somewhere in that neighborhood, which is the equivalent to the 15%. Is that correct?
Admittedly, Mr. Chairman, I am not sure I follow you, Councilor Merlan.
Yeah. Okay, well, every year we start with 1.5 and then we add, 1.5 or 2 or whatever. And since inception, you just said it was like, I forget, I got 13 point something, and then we're going to add to that. So that's where I'm getting the 15%. Okay. That's a tax that everyone's paying this year, that 15%. And then we've had assessment growth. A lot of, there's a lot of spending here in this budget this year. This is my concern, and a lot of new taxes. So when we go, oh, we're only doing 4.8, we're the lowest, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of more new tax happening this year. So I'm just trying to get that number.
Sure. Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the 13.1% that was built up through the infrastructure levy since 2012, that really has to be looked at something that's already happened. It's contained within the budget, but we've been spending that money on infrastructure. So while it has been raised, it has been used for infrastructure, which was the purpose of it. So it is not something that I would tag or add into any other increase that you have going on this year, because I think that really confuses things in my viewpoint anyways.
Okay, I'm not saying that anything is happening that shouldn't be happening, and I'm just saying that's what people are paying this year.
True.
And it's plus. So
true,
just so we can be completely transparent about it. It's not, we're not just adding 1.5, they're paying now 15, right? So that's all I'm trying to say.
Mr. Chairman, I understand where you're coming from. I get it.
Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow Councillor Merlehan's thought process there, because if you want to think about that, you can go back 20 years and see what the tax increase is. It's all cumulative. And where do you start? Where do you stop? I think we're talking about 1 year at a time. We're not talking about the last 13 years or the last 10 years or whatever we want to talk about. I mean, all of our taxes are cumulative. So I think you can only talk 1 year at a time if you want to compare things from year to year.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Petherick, for helping us do this budget. So you said it was a 5.87% increase at this point. Is that right? So and that's with a 3% infrastructure levy. And so again, people have been talking about a 2% infrastructure levy. So I think that would bring it down to 4.3 something percent. Is that right?
4.87.
Oh, 4.87. Okay, thank you. So are we ready to move in that direction? Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
No, I'm not ready yet. I think this is a pretty big decision, and I think if we
Yep.
got to spend some time on it, I think that this is the kind of thing we should spend time on. I'm interested in whether or not Mayor Shantz wants to take a run at convincing people that 3% is the right number. Like I would like to get to a place where we don't have a 3-2 vote. So, you know, I think Councillor Shantz said it a couple weeks ago. People have to pay. They either have to pay in a levy increase or they have to pay interest on a debenture. We're not deciding whether or not somebody has to pay. We're only deciding whether or not it's interest or a levy increase. And I think if we're not having that conversation, then we're having the conversation about what roads. I mean, we talked as a council about wanting more roads paved, not less. Like we wanted more projects like that. We want an expensive heritage bridge preserved. I think that's the right decision. It costs a lot of money. If we're delaying projects, it's not going to cost less in the future. So if we're moving beyond the levy increase versus interest, we're moving into those other conversations that we've already had, that we want more roads paved. We want the heritage bridge. We want to do projects. So if we're having the conversation about levy increase or interest, you know, that we're not talking about whether or not people pay. It's just what end do they pay on.
Good comments. Good comments. This is time to have the discussion about how much we want the taxpayer to pay. Great. Any other comments, Mayor Shantz?
I guess I would ask Councillor Martin, perhaps. He commented that he would support 2%. What would convince you to go to 3%, as Councillor McMillan was suggesting?
That's not even in the cards. I'm not interested in 3%. And basically because of where we're spending our money. I know we need that extra 1.5% just to cover off the debenture for the bridge. But after that debenture is paid 15, 20 years, what do we have? We've got a liability. If we put that money into something good and would have built something new or restored the other one, what would we have? Something that would last for another 75 or 100 years, or like Pat says, it'll last 300 years. That's my issue. It's not the amount, is where we're spending it. So I will not support a 3%. Like I know Councillor McMillan said, we have to close the gap. Well, we're not closing the gap, because when we do a debenture on something like the bridge, we have to increase it by 1.5% just to carry it. Like we're not closing the gap at all. And I think I shouldn't be the only one that can figure that out. I will support 0.5%. In fact, I'll make that a motion that we increase the levy by 0.5% to 2%, and that future councils can deal with it at their budget time.
Can we vote on that alone rather than on the budget? Clerk Smith, can we do that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, you could make that motion, and then you could do a subsequent motion for the budget as a whole.
Okay. So Councillor Martin moved that we would go to a 2% infrastructure levy in this budget year. Do I have a seconder? Nope. Seeing that, no. So where do you want to go then? You want to leave it at 3%? You want to leave it at 1.5%? Or do we want to raise our taxes to be similar to the other townships? We can raise our taxes by 45% and see what because we're always looking at comparators. But in this situation, we don't look at a comparator. Like, how did we get so far behind? But that's for another question. Anyway, what do you want to do in terms of the infrastructure levy? We don't want to go to 2%. We want to keep it the same. Councillor Shantz, put it out a great thing about 3%. So Councillor McMillan, go ahead. And then Councillor Shantz.
I defer to Councillor Shantz. I was just trying to save you and get you off the ledge there, Chair Redekop. Councillor Shantz can go.
I just wanted to say that Councillor McMillan isn't going to get 100% of the vote. As long as we're going to continue debenturing the bridge, I'm not going to vote to accept the budget, so he's not going to get his 100%. I do agree that we have to increase the levy, but I don't know what that amount is. I would have no problem putting another % on it and make it 2.5%, meet everybody in the middle. But my vote isn't going to matter anyway at the end of the day.
Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Could we do it separately? Could we vote for a 1% increase on the infrastructure levy? Gets us to 2.5%. Have that agreed to by council, and then pass the budget as a whole, with the Peel Street Bridge in it.
Yeah.
So I would move that we would increase the infrastructure levy by 2.5% instead of 1.5%.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Shantz? Seconder, any other comments? Call for the question. All those in favor of the infrastructure levy going to 2.5% in this budget year? Okay, all those in favor, 3 in favor, all those against, opposed? 2 opposed, that passed. So Mr. Petherick, if you can put it instead of a 3% infrastructure levy, a 2.5% infrastructure levy. Great. Thank you for the vigorous discussion. It's all good. Now we go to the budget. According to Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
I'll move the recommendation with the one change that it's a 2.5% levy increase instead of 3.
Okay, thank you. As seconder? Mayor Shantz? Any discussion? Councillor Martin and then Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I'm not going to discuss what's in the budget. I want to discuss what is not in the budget. And I'll go back to my first term in council. And that would have been in the mid-90s. We moved the resolution that we would turn 1 gravel road into hardtop each year, whether it was Township or asphalt. Mr. Aubrey was in council those days, and I think he brought it forward or I did, but we supported each other. So how have we done in the last 28 years? How many roads do you think we've done? The first road we did was Crow's Foot, and I could be corrected somewhere along the line. The second one was Three Bridges Road. Then we did Reedwoods Drive. Then we did Sandy Hills Drive, and then we did Apple Grove. And last year in 2021, we turned 2 gravel roads into Township plus a boundary road. So that gives us a total of 7 roads in 28 years. That's 1 road in 1 term of council. And I think that's unacceptable. Okay. I'll have some more to say, but that's what I'll say about what's not in the budget.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the sentiment, Councillor Martin. I remember when I came on council as a councillor, talking about paving gravel roads. So I appreciate where you're coming from. But if we are to improve those pieces of infrastructure, we need to have the money to do it. And we don't have them. We haven't had the money to do it. Part of the whole infrastructure levy piece. And one of the things that I remember about setting up the infrastructure levy or at least some discussion, maybe shortly after I was elected mayor, I don't recall, but was using it to leverage funds from other levels of government. So that's another piece of it. So when the province says we will match money that you put in, we would have funds there to be able to do that. And I recall that discussion too. So I think if we want these projects done, then we need to find a way to get the money to do them.
Thank you for that comment. In the earlier budget discussion, I remember Mr. Poupet said he would gladly pave all our roads, but there's just not enough money for it. So I think I remember him saying that in this budget year, we will not have money either. Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to vote in favor of the motion. So I moved it. I've heard some comments from council that they're really frustrated with how this process has gone. I heard comments from councillors that we haven't changed anything. I've heard council say that, we just put a number out there and staff met it. But I think what's different about this budget and why all of those things are true is that this is a council budget. We gave staff a direction. We gave clear expectations. We had rigorous debate about the greening levy. We had rigorous debate about the Peel Street Bridge. We've now had vigorous debate about the infrastructure levy. We've had vigorous debate about various different projects, whether they stay in or come out. Nobody has gotten everything that they wanted. But at the end of the day, this is not a staff budget that they've brought into us for us to be an auditor and a level of oversight and to make changes to. This is a council budget. Staff followed our lead. There's a reason why there wasn't much to change. And that's because we had vigorous debate leading up to the budget being brought to us. And that's the way it's supposed to go. We're not a level of oversight for the government. We're the government. It's our budget. We have to be able to build the budget so that we can take it to our constituents and say, this is why we did these things. And we're never going to agree. The six of us, we're never going to agree on everything. But I think all of us have something in here that we like, and we all have stuff that we don't like. But at the end of the day, this is the six of us making the sausage, and it's ugly and it doesn't look good. And if you see it being made, you don't want to eat it. But this is a council budget. And I think we've had compromise. Everybody has had to compromise a little bit. There's been some close votes. There's been some contentious issues. But I think at the end of the day, we are giving something that all of us can take to our constituents and say, this is why this is this way. And people who voted against the Peel Street Bridge can say, this is why I voted against it. And people who voted for it can say, this is why I voted for it. And the greening levy, this is why I voted for it. And people who were against the greening levy can say, I was against it, and this is why. But at the end of the day, there's six people that are putting, our best heads together to get something that we can stand behind. And I really feel like there's a reason why there wasn't much to change this year. And there's a reason why staff hit that mark that we gave. And at the end of the day, 4.85 is pretty close. We took out the greening levy. We added 0.5%. We added that to the infrastructure levy. And then we added another 0.5% to the infrastructure levy. So we're really close to where we were in August. I think it's been a really productive journey to get here. And I think that I understand the frustration. Compromise is frustrating sometimes, but I think at the end of the day, we got here together, and each of us has a piece in this.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments to the motion that's on the floor to accept the budget? So, Councillor Martin, did you have a comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple other things on my list. I know I've mentioned them before, and they won't go anywhere. I know that. To put $100,000 in the climate change, I told you before, I was against that because we had something like $75,000 or $80,000 set aside for that already. And the $70,000 we're putting in a nature trail. When they came to us on 2 occasions and said they're not asking for money, this was supposed to be a community project. If I would have known back then that we're going to fund a lot of this, I certainly wouldn't have supported it on the basis that we have a big deficit in a recreational radio to the tune of over $3 million. Let me say something about climate change and why I get frustrated. And you can do with it what you want. But I read an article last week where the federal government is being investigated because they put millions of dollars into a company, and I'm not sure what they were getting from it, but 3 times more than any government has ever put into them. And now all of a sudden they discovered that there's a lot of money missing. So they want to check and see what happened. And then the last paragraph of the article said that this company they're dealing with is one of the world's worst polluters. Well, if that is the case and you're serious about climate change, they should have no business dealing with them. Not at all. You shouldn't be dealing with a company like that. You should be dealing with somebody else if you're serious. You know, and I know we've made some changes. We spend some money. And like I've said before, I like to get value for our money. And we made some little things, changes in the township. And I'm not opposed to them. If we can do little things to help us, I'm in. However, during the month of December, they ran that tourist train back and forth to Meyer, blowing their whistle all day. And it poured out so much smoke. The first time I saw it looking towards St. Jacobs, I thought we had a fire going. I didn't realize it was a train coming down the tracks. So whatever we gained for $100,000 or whatever we're going to spend, we've lost in 1 month running that train. And I go back to what Council Sean said last week when we talked about the splash pad. We need to be consistent with our messages. Now, of course, he got shot down and 2 people said, oh, no, that's totally different, and explained their way around it. But I think he's right. We need to be consistent. If we're really worried about climate change and what we put in the atmosphere, that train should meet the same regulations as a diesel truck going down the highway. And it should have been stopped. But no, we would never dare do that because, oh, people like that. So I asked myself the question, are we really serious about climate change? It just seems to be something that everybody wants to talk about. What are we going to gain? 3 years ago, when we first talked about climate change, I said, okay, I'm in, because I don't understand it all. But I will ask you in 1 year what we've gained. What difference has it made what we've done? You came up with nothing. I didn't bother asking the next year because I knew the answer was the same. I want to see positive things that we are doing that are going to make a difference. I've said before, I like to get value for my money. I like to spend money like it's my own. And the late President Reagan said, and this applies sometimes, any fool can spend someone else's money.
Thank you.
I would have liked, and I didn't want to pull those monies out to get our tax rate lower. I'd be quite happy if that $170,000 all went into our infrastructure. I'd be pleased with that. I mean, I don't care if we're down at 4.87. I'm quite happy at 5.87 if the money's going at the right place. So that's all my comments on the budget.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, I just have a little pushback for Councillor McMillan. I don't agree with the fact that it's council's budget. I think the only input I felt that I had input into was the 4.85, which I didn't agree with at the time. And then staff came back with what they think was best. And I don't think that's a council budget. That's a staff budget with council's direction. And I really caution us doing that again this year because there's going to be a new council next year. And if we make those decisions for the new council, where does that put them? So I guess that's the caution I would put up right now, that we don't do that again for 2023, because it's going to be a new council and we've already decided what they should be spending, and I don't think that's fair.
Thank you. Mayor Shantz, go ahead.
Just for clarification, I believe the new council will vote on the new budget. I think at least that's how we did it. We voted on the budget at the beginning of our term, so.
Yeah, that's right. Councilor Shantz, go ahead. You have a response?
Yes, Mayor Shantz is absolutely correct, but we didn't have any numbers put out in for us prior to that budget. There is nothing that was given ahead of time. It came back from staff with their recommendations, and then we went through the budget and looked at the numbers. We didn't give them a number ahead of time to work on. That's the way I remember it.
Any other comments about Councilor Merlehan? Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, just a general comment again. Just off of what Councilor Shantz talked about, this not really being a council budget. I felt that way the last, I don't know, well, this entire term of council, second term of council, that they haven't been council budgets. They are staff led for the most part. These aren't full-time jobs for us. And we take a lot of direction, but I've just felt that, you know, it is our job as to provide oversight, to make sure that the money makes sense where we're spending it, to provide overall direction. And yes, we vote on it, and technically it is a council budget because we vote on it. But, you know, the participation factor is, it has to be equally shared. And I really don't feel like that has been shared as a council. I think there are a couple members of council that do a majority of the vetting and try and get a real understanding of the business and how it operates and where things spend it. And it's not something, you know, you get in your first year and you pick up a little bit more in your second year. You know, on an eighth budget, I'm still learning things, and even financing tonight, I learned that, you know, the one debt financing is sewer debt. I mean, we weren't talking about any of the where things were coming from. So, you know, it is a never-ending learning opportunity. And I think as council members, we all have to share in that learning opportunity and speak up and have questions. And it can't be just two people doing that work. I voted against the budget. I don't even know if anybody even noticed the last bunch of years. And it's a silent protest vote, that because it's not really council that is properly vetting these budgets. And that's the reason I'm going to vote against this budget again tonight, because council as a whole did not contribute to the budget. And that's just my opinion.
Great, thank you. Okay, so looks like we're ready for the vote. Clerk Smith, can you clarify what entails a recorded vote for us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. A recorded vote requires the clerk to call members of council for the question. Council has asked that that be done in a random order. I will clarify with Mr. Petherick, the motion on the floor is to at least one of the items in the motion is to approve the 2022 operating and capital budgets. I think we'll say as further amended, because council did make an amendment tonight, and then with a net levy of an amount that Mr. Petherick will hopefully calculate for us with the lower 2.5% levy.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if you like that now, I can give that to you.
Sure, go ahead.
12,895,000 $1,563. So 12895,563.
Thank you. Any other instructions, Clerk Smith?
So yes, the motion on the floor is that Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report FO5 2022 respecting the 2022 budget approval, approve the operating and capital budgets as further amended with a net levy of $12,895,563 as summarized in Appendix A. It is also to approve the 2022 water budget with a net expenditure of $4,241,085 as summarized in Appendix C. It is to approve the 2022 wastewater budget with a net expenditure that's listed on your agendas. It's to approve the water and wastewater fees and charges bylaws as attached as Appendix E and F. And it's to approve the Township of Woolwich's 2022 corporate business plan as presented during the budget deliberations. So if council is voting in favor, they are approving that recommendation. And if you are opposed, you are not in favor of that recommendation.
Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Yeah, question of procedure here. If there's a motion, it's seconded, it's voted, and it fails, is there a process to have that motion voted on again? Or is that done? It can't be revisited?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, that motion cannot be revisited without a motion to reconsider. So council could use that process. If the motion in front of you fails, you could look at further changes that would gather more support from council for more than a simple majority, because as you point out, a simple majority would result in defeat. An equal number of members would result in defeat.
So we're in the process of going through the rules here to vote, but is there any way I could move that we defer this decision for 10 minutes for further conversation about the motion that's on the floor? We jumped pretty quickly from the last speaker to call in the question, and I wonder if there's room for a little bit more follow-up.
That would be up through to the chair.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So
go ahead.
Is everybody okay with that?
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Okay. So we're in a bit of a predicament here, right? Because Councilor Merlehan's gonna vote against the budget for principled purposes, and I understand your reasoning behind that. Councilor Shantz and Councilor Martin aren't going to vote to approve the budget with the Peel Street Bridge in. So that leaves us with 3 people that are going to vote in favor of the budget. So that's going to fail. And then we're gonna, the next step here is to have a similar levy structure type increase and pass a budget without the Peel Street Bridge. And if we take the Peel Street Bridge out of the budget, Mayor Shantz, I can see you're saying like what, but how do we get to a budget that passes? Because in order for us to get some votes on board, you know, Councilor Shantz, Councilor Martin, we take the Peel Street Bridge out. So something's got to give here, or we're going to be at an impasse that is not surmountable. It's not over, we can't overcome it. So I think before we allow this motion to fail on a tie vote, we should think about what the consequences are, because I agree, we have stated in a public meeting several times that we want to preserve the Peel Street Bridge and preserve it with heritage value. But if it means not having a budget, that might be the thing that has to go in order for us to get a budget that can pass. So that's why I moved that we deferred this for a few minutes, because I think we need to think about the chessboard and what happens if we play this piece this way.
Councilor Shantz and then Councilor Martin.
Maybe I can help ease Councillor McMillan's mind a little bit and go back to the fact that we didn't tell the people that we were going to actually do the work. We deferred it until the budget time. We're in the budget time, and now we're talking about it again. And so if we decide not to do it, we're not breaking any promises, as per some councillors saying. And we are preserving it. It's going to stand for another year, another decade. It's going to stand for another council. So if we defer it, the next council or future councils can decide. So we're not tearing it down.
Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not as quick to say that we're going to throw that bridge out of the budget. What I'm very disappointed is that we didn't look at any other options. I suggested before that we could combine a new bridge and part of the old one to maintain our heritage value, just like they did, I believe, in London. That's one option. Another option would have been is put a section of it in a field someplace with a parking area, a nice plaque, and write up about it. The problem is we didn't explore any of those options. We didn't even as much as ask staff to come back and say, what would it look like? Show us some drawings of what it would look like or what other municipalities have done. No, we just went right down the road that we're going to have a pedestrian bridge only. And to me, to spend that kind of money is wrong. It's a poor investment because, like I said before, after the debentures paid, what do we have? A liability. If we do it right, we'd have something that would last another 75 years. But we never explored any of those other options. I think that's my big issue. I would sooner spend a little more money and have something at the end of the debenture worthwhile having. And I just wish, we would have instructed staff to come back with some of that information.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Merlehan, go ahead.
I could get over my principles on the Peel Street Bridge. But that goes with me saying that I think there's people on this council that I really hope, for the sake of Woolwich Township's future, don't run again in the future. This budget, the budgets are very important.
Point of order. That's irresponsible comment, Mr. Merlehan. You're accusing us without naming us. That's not acceptable.
You can ask me to stop. I don't need a sermon from you, sir.
That's not acceptable.
That's according to you. That's fine. I'll stand down.
You can't just accuse people and not name us.
If you think you're one of them, that's on you.
Are we ready to move on?
You still want a recorded vote? That's what's on the floor. It's been called for. No more discussion? Clerk Smith, can you record the recorded vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. As I mentioned, it would be to approve the 2022 budget with all the items listed on your agenda. The operating and capital budgets would be as further amended with the 2.5 infrastructure levy. If you're voting in favor, you are voting in favor of the budget. And if you are opposed to the budget with those numbers in it. So in no particular order, Councillor Shantz, in favor or opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Martin?
Sorry, you were muted, Murray.
Opposed.
Councillor Merlihan,
In favor.
Mayor Shantz,
In favor.
Councillor Redekop,
In favor.
Councillor McMillan.
In favor.
That motion is carried with 4 votes in favor and 2 opposed.
Okay, I'll turn the meeting back to Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, Councillor Redekop, for doing that. We have a drinking water system annual summary report, and Mr. Poupey, Director of Infrastructure Services, will present that. Welcome, Mr. Poupey.
Thank you, Chairman Shantz, and through you to members of council. I want to first apologize for the title. It is Engineering and Planning Services Staff Report, so that will be corrected for the council meeting on February 14th. That did slip through me. This report is an annual report, as council is aware. It's an information report. We are asking council to receive the report and that we also provide copies to our neighboring municipalities where we share water services. That is City of Kitchener, City of Waterloo, and the Township of Wellesley. As you note in the report, we are down to 4 large systems now. That is a reduction as we have been able to amalgamate our Woolwich North system to include St. Jacobs, Elmira, West Montrose, and Conestoga. That is a good news story for us. That helps to reduce some of the duplication as far as testing goes. So we're quite happy of that, and council is aware of that. We still unfortunately did deal with 11 adverse water quality incidences in 2021. And you can see that we have provided a history of those adverses since 2018. So it is fairly common, and we are around those numbers: 11 in 2018, 10 in 2019, and 10 in 2020. The adverses are listed in Appendix A, and some of them obviously involve reconstruction projects. Unfortunately, again, I wish that was unusual, but it is not. It is fairly commonplace when you're dealing with small systems looking to provide potable water during a reconstruction project. So nothing is abnormal or unusual. Everything was able to be rectified through flushing. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions council may have on the report.
Thank you, Mr. Poupey. Questions for Mr. Poupey, council? Councilor Merlihan.
Yeah, through you to Mr. Poupey. Just the adverses, you had 11 this year, 4 of them on Union Street. Are those all construction related just this past summer?
Yeah, through you, Chair Shantz, to Councilor Merlihan, that's correct. They were all construction related.
Okay, and in past years, were there issues on Union Street that were like this, or?
Not to my knowledge. It was all as a result of the reconstruction project.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. We have a recommendation. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Martin and Councillor McMillan. Any further discussion? No? I'll ask the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're into other business. Council reports and updates. Are there any reports from council? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I'd just like to say that this council doesn't very often say anything positive about the region, but I was really impressed at how fast they removed the snow from Arthur Church Street. They've been through Conestoga and cleaned up the boulevards there and the snowbanks. I think they've done a terrific job.
Thank you. Mayor Shantz, you had something to bring forward?
Just a comment, if I can have the latitude to do that, please. Thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
I think this evening we've seen a lot of passion about a lot of things. And the reason we've seen so much passion is because every one of the councillors around this table cares a great deal about the community and about their commitment to the community. And so, you know, we try to respect each other. We don't always like each other. And I hope that we can remember that the passion is because we all care and respect each other for that. So I thank each of you for your service and for the effort that you put into the work that you do.
Thank you. Any other comments or anything to bring forward? Seeing none. Any discussion on the outstanding activity list? No? Okay, no notice of motion. Adjournment. Anybody want to move it or we stay here all night? Mayor Shantz, Councillor Martin, all in favor? And that is carried. Council would like to thank all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. I will remind council to stay connected until we receive confirmation that the live stream has stopped. Good night, everyone.